All right, welcome back. This is KP Ready Unpacked. This is my opportunity to ask KP Ready, hey, when you posted that on LinkedIn, what were you thinking? Or what inspired you to post that on LinkedIn? My name is Jeff Eccles. I'm a senior advisor and the director of our mastermind groups and our incubator at KP Ready Company. And as usual, I'm joined by the man that needs no introduction. He's our CEO and our founder. It's KP Ready. So KP, welcome back.
Hey
Great to
Jeff,
see
how's
you
it going?
today.
Good to see
It's
you.
going great. Yeah, thank you. We're recording this right after Thanksgiving. Before we hit record, we were talking about the Georgia Tech game and the things that happened over the holiday. I know there's some anger and frustration around that. Maybe that comes out in this recording. I don't know.
Yeah, we could talk about that. I think I posted the Sunday Scaries actually.
You
If we
did.
want to talk about the Sunday Scaries and the Georgia Tech game, we can chat about that.
Yeah, we maybe that's a different episode, but yeah, that's something that a lot of people in our community. This is a community. For those of you, maybe you just happened upon this podcast somehow, randomly. It was suggested to you in some algorithm or something like that. But much of our audience, so to speak, much of our community is they're engineers and they're architects and they're construction managers, et cetera. It's the people that shape, that design and build and develop and operate the built environment. So there are an awful lot of Georgia Tech grads and other architecture and engineering school grads. So I think discussions like that hit close to home for a lot of people. But or and one of the things that you posted on your LinkedIn account that I shared out as well, I
Mhm.
reshared, was a survey that you did about the reason that people leave the AEC world. And so, for those of you that are out there and don't know this, one of the things that I do, in addition to my role here at KP Ready Company, is I teach in in graduate and undergrad classes. I teach professional practice, and I ask, especially my undergrad students, a very similar question. Basically, I ask them, what do they want to get out of a career um, in architecture? So I'm teaching in architecture school specifically, so the A in the AEC. But I ask them, what is it that you're interested in? And maybe this is also a good setup for this conversation about the poll that you posted, KP. But the vast majority of those students don't say a traditional architecture role or traditional
Mhm.
architecture firm, or a vast majority say not a traditional architecture role or not a traditional architecture firm. But your poll was specifically about why people leave the
Mhm.
profession, the AEC industry. So why don't you give us a recap of what inspired you? Let's start there. What inspired you to post that poll? Because it got an awful lot of results, an awful lot of responses. But what was the impetus for posting that in the first place?
Well, I think it's the same thing that drove my interest in us starting the early career mastermind group, which was, I get hit up a lot, right, from founders, from investors. My inbox is never empty. But one thing I prioritize in terms of getting on 15-minute calls and having a good conversation is with college students and early career people. I generally will prioritize them over most anyone just to understand what they're thinking. And it comes from a deep rooted concern that our industry is just not attracting the right talent. And our future talent base is really going to be very mediocre at best if we don't bring in talent that's like top of the top. And I'm seeing that pattern, right? Whether they leave to do a startup or go into other industries. I've seen a lot of people have reached out to me. They're like, oh, yeah, I left architecture to go do UX design, which is fantastic. However, someone that has that creativity to move purely from architecture to UX design is someone we probably need in our industry, right? So I feel like many ways, if the best of the best move out, um, the regression to the mean of talent happens, and it's going to be a lot lower than what it was. The middle will be a lot lower than what it was maybe 10, 15 years ago. Um, so I think that's what motivated the poll. What I didn't expect was for people to get really that into it. We got a lot of reposts. We got a lot of now, statistically, we got 338 votes. Statistically, is that significant? No, it's not. So I'm not trying to do, some quantitative analysis on this. It's more like, just different patterns from this. And a lot of it was in the comments.
Yeah, and so no, 338 is not statistically relevant um, in relation to the entire industry. But I think in terms of a LinkedIn poll, um, it's actually a pretty good number. But even if it's still in the realm of anecdotal, right? We get reinforcement of this over and over. Like I said, my undergrad students, right, are reinforcing anecdotally are reinforcing this. You mentioned our early and mid career mastermind group. And for those of you that are out there listening, this is a mastermind group that meets twice a month. We bring in speakers from all around the industry twice a month. And it's a peer group, just like any mastermind group, where these early and mid career, whether they're in AEC or interested in AEC, they can join this group, or they do join this group. And I think we're expanding at about 2 people a week or something. So this is growing relatively rapidly here. And they show up to meet each other. They show up to network with each other. They show up to hear from people all around the industry about what these more seasoned professionals, maybe is a way to say
Mhm,
it, what they see in terms of the future in the industry, what excites them about the future of the industry, and they also talk about their path to that point, which I think is
yeah.
another reason that people show up. And you and I launched that group because you and I had alternative paths.
Mhm,
You're Georgia Tech engineering, I'm Ball State architecture, and neither one of us is acting,
mhm.
as what our degree was. Right? We had these alternative paths through the industry, and I think, and I know you agree, but I think it's really important for us to expose the alternatives that are out there, but also as the reasons that you can and should be here, and you as a early and mid career, you have the potential to change the future.
Mhm.
We're on a precipice of change right now.
Yeah, but I think there's also kind of a bigger um, concerning, topic, right? Like
Sure. Yeah.
if you look at children, right? They play with blocks, they play with Legos, they play with bulldozers. My 2.5-year-old is doing all those things. They grow up, they start participating in robotics things, just different things in school, right? It's all very exciting, very creative. And then for the half of your students that are so what you're saying is half of your students are already disenfranchised with the industry, which means
Before
there's
they get there.
before they even get there. Then there's a second half that believes that, oh my God, I'm still so excited about architecture. I'm so excited about civil engineering. I'm going to be designing this and that. And they're very excited and very enthusiastic. And I remind the executives I deal with, do you remember being that way?
Mhm.
Excited about the content of your work. And now all you do is review timesheets and fill out reports and everything that's not fun. And so I think to your point, half of your students are already disenfranchised. The other half will find out in short order that what they thought the job was is not what the job is.
Right.
And so then we have that issue, right? So we're already losing people. So I think one of the comments in the poll was we have a marketing problem,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's true, right? I think that's true. Um, and I think that the truth comes from if you're an architect and you're just an architecture geek, and you're trying to be, the next Frank Gehry, the next Zaha, the next Norm Foster, whatever. Well, there's like five of those people.
Right.
That's not the industry. Writ
Right.
large, that is not the industry. The industry is a lot of K through 12, a lot of fire stations, it's a lot of other stuff, right? So I think as we think about the joy of work and what impact we have on society, I don't think we market it very well to an upcoming generation. So I think one of the things that people commented on is like, hey, we have a marketing problem because the things that we do are cool in concept, but when it comes to day to day, maybe a little bit less cool. And if you look at industries like the MEP engineering world, so you think about someone with a mechanical or electrical engineering degree, they have lots of options, right? They have
Right.
lots of options, right? It's not like a civils, right? It's not like, what are we going to do? We're going to do the same things. We have no choice but to enter the industry. We don't have a lot of options out there. But when you look at electrical and mechanical engineers, they can go work for Tesla or whoever. So
Hmm.
we already have kind of a brain drain of the top talent going to those spots with the mechanical and electrical engineering. So I think, besides how do we make the industry more fun, how do we keep it to its true form, and have like true mission oriented firms, I think we have a lot of work to do. And now what I think, um, and now I think if you look at it, right, um, when we look at these students and they try to come through and they go get a job and then they get disenfranchised, the thing that I found most fascinating in the poll is I didn't call anyone out in terms of respondents. When it came to kind of the culture, the old school culture question,
Right.
there were several CEOs of ENR 500 firms that responded with that,
Hmm.
which was annoying. It's like, well, that's your job,
Yeah.
right? Like you're
You
you're
you are
picking.
the old school.
You are the old school. How about like do something about it? How about we do something? Like so it's one thing to have a bunch of junior people say, oh, the culture, the old school culture.
Hmm.
When you have the old school culture people saying it's the old school culture problem, like why don't you do something about it?
Yeah.
Which I thought was fascinating, right? On the compensation, same exact thing. Bunch of the CEOs of these firms talking about it's like you literally have like if you're a junior person, you don't have a say in your compensation, but when you're the CEO of a 10,000, 25,000 person firm, what are you doing? Like you have an opportunity to do something about it.
Hmm.
And so I thought that was super super fascinating. The other kind of note, which I had to sit there and like LinkedIn does not do a good job with their analytics. I had to like print out the results and pull out highlighters like old school. Ugh. But one of the things that I found fascinating was almost 75% of the people that responded about compensation being a problem were all registered professionals,
Hmm.
professional engineers, SCs, AIA, which I found fascinating that there was such a bias towards compensation, which tells me a couple things, right? I mean, it's like I said, it's opinions rooted in some triggering of data that I see, right? Um, so what it tells me is that as you matriculate up and now you're like registered, you're a principal, you've paid your dues, so to speak, right? That you don't feel like you're getting paid what you're worth. Like I thought once I get registered, I thought once I hit that next level of pay that I was going to make a lot more money. It turns out it's not a lot more money. And
Right.
oh, by the way, now I'm also taking on more risk.
Right.
So, I thought that, I mean, that's the only thing I can glean from that. When 75% of the respondents are registered, um, that tells me a lot that I think that could be the thing. It's we bring the young people on, we tell them, here's the brass ring, get registered, become a principal, blah, 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 grind it out till you get there. And once you get there, now you made it.
Hmm.
turns out you haven't. It
Yeah.
turns out it's just another day.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it's interesting that you say that because that's sort of the story of my career,
Mhm,
right? I looked at it and the alternative route piece of it, I looked at it and said, okay, well, I'm really interested in the business side of architecture, the
mhm,
marketing and the business development side, and excuse me, and eventually the management side of the firms. And I'm pretty good at that. And so if I actually sit for this exam and I become a licensed architect or registered architect, depending on what your state calls it, it's exactly what you're saying. Right? Okay, they're gonna give me a bump of like $1,000 a year,
mhm,
and then there's the risk of it, right? Then there's the risk in the office and out of the office of being that licensed professional. Why would I do that? And that really kind of kicked me down that, or partially kicked me down that alternative path. And so that absolutely rings true for me. And it is no surprise to me that the old school culture, well, the number one response was the compensation, and old school culture was the second most popular response. But that's not a surprise at all. I think those of us that have been around, we know that. We also know that the culture piece of it is changing very rapidly with
mhm.
the the generational change that's afoot right now. But but I think you mentioned the mission driven firms and the impact, and that's one of the things that we talk about a lot around KP Ready Company. Um, is because it's the answer, right? Well,
Mhm,
why do you guys run an incubator? Why do you guys run these mastermind groups? Why do you guys have this early and mid career um, mastermind group? To what end?
mhm,
And our response to that is always sort of a mission driven, purpose driven response because
mhm,
we know that we can have an impact on people's lives, right? The built
mhm,
environment has a bigger impact on humanity than just about anything out there. And by creating a better work environment, by having more talented people, by bringing new technology, all those things that we focus on, that we work on all the time, that is very mission driven, right? And it's for the purpose of changing and improving the built environment. Because the reality is, if you go work for Tesla or SpaceX or all those other great opportunities that are out there are days where that work sucks too,
mhm.
right? There are days where that work is very mundane and
Yeah.
all of that. It may be sexier in the end. It may be flashier, but work is work, right?
Mhm,
On some level. But as you pointed out, there is a mission here
mhm,
in the AEC industry, and we can do better in
mhm.
terms of creating workplaces, in terms of creating environments, and the compensation answer, I think, is always has been, and until we make some
Yeah,
significant changes, I think always will be at the
yeah.
top.
100%. But, like all the studies say, people do not quit their jobs because of
Right,
compensation, right?
right,
Um, but that's assuming they're earning a wage that they can actually pay their bills.
right.
Okay. Like, yeah, that's a different topic. But what I find out is all these early career folks, how many of them hit me up and would gladly take a 50% pay cut to come work for me? There's a line. There's a line of these kids that would happily, in some cases, I've had some of them have said, "Hey, I'll come work for free. I've saved
Hmm.
enough money. If I can prove myself to you for 3 to 6 months, I'll come work for free, KP." So
Right.
compensation matters, but it also doesn't matter. There's also an interesting dynamic happening. Um, if you are the top academic achiever in engineering, for example, a little less architecture, but in engineering across disciplines, you are being recruited by McKinsey, Bain, Booz Allen. Starting salary, 120 grand.
Double
That
what you
is
would get somewhere else.
double. right? So in a world where these young people have put themselves under pressure with student loans, blah, 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 right?
Hmm.
What are they going to do? Like, I mean, how do they look at themselves in the mirror and say, oh, I'm going to turn down a job that's twice as much money,
Hmm.
and I got all these student loans? It doesn't leave them space to even think about like doing what's right. The other thing is, short of working for Frank Gehry or Norm Foster, you graduate, you're at your graduation party with all your friends and family. Oh, who did you get a job offer? Yeah, man. Like, where do you want to work? Oh, McKinsey, Bain. Everybody's like, oh wow, oh
Hmm.
wow. XYZ architecture firm. Who? What?
Who's
When?
that?
Where?
Yeah.
What's that?
What do
So
they
I
do?
think, what do they do? I've never heard of them. Gensler, what's that?
Hmm.
Like literally, what's that? Who even knows what Gensler is?
Right.
Outside of the two guys on this call, maybe half the population listening to this podcast.
Maybe.
Nobody knows who they're. Nobody knows who they are. Nobody cares. Bottom line, right? Maybe some of these AEC firms should take out Super Bowl ads.
Maybe.
Couple million bucks. Couple
Right.
million bucks, right? Hey WSP, take out a Super Bowl ad.
Right. Right. You've
Um,
already invested that in RFPs that you're going to lose.
mhm,
Just throwing that out there.
mhm. So we do have a marketing problem. It's actually fascinating to me too. Like when you watch college football season, which we're all just kind of coming out of, when they do those little, vignette commercials around the different schools, SEC,
Right.
ACC, and then they'll have like Georgia Tech, and you notice they're not doing anything AEC oriented.
Right.
It's all like biotech, which Georgia Tech has a tiny, tiny biotech group.
Hmm.
Yet they want to show people with little pipettes and in the lab with lab coats, and then they want to show rockets. They show everything but our industry because they actually want kids to come to their colleges. Yeah. Let's show somebody at a drafting table. That'll get kids to come to college.
Yeah. 100% true. I mean, my daughter, as you know, is at Purdue, similar school to Georgia Tech. And while they while they do a lot of rocket things, an
Hmm.
awful lot of astronauts go to Purdue. The their marketing, which I guess this is what's the old saying? Marketers ruin everything, but their marketing is the sexy things.
Hmm.
Um, what is it? Right. That's a great point. We have a marketing problem. We sit around, you and I and the rest of our team, we sit around and talk about the impact of the things that we do, whether it's startups, whether it's the AE firms or the C firms or whoever it is that we consult with. We facilitate mastermind groups with innovation leaders or early and mid career AEC professionals. And we talk about the impact of all of this work on the way that people live, the lives
Hmm.
all around the world, and maybe beyond at this point if we're talking about icon 3D printing
Hmm.
on Mars. But um, that's the marketing problem, right? There's not the focus on those types of activities. So I think those comments and I think that idea is 100% on. Um, and I also think, and I know we're going to get into this in a later conversation as we unpack more of your LinkedIn posts, but I think we also have the problem of understanding how to have those conversations in a broader, with owners and developers, operators, people like that. Because if we're going to get to the idea of compensation, we've got to be able to charge more. We've got to be able to understand the true value of what we're creating,
Hmm.
and we have to help
Yeah.
these early
Yeah.
and mid career people
Okay.
understand that.
So here's what I'll tell you. Um, the compensation problem is a leadership problem. You cannot
Hundred
complain
percent.
about you cannot complain about, the, oh, my customers don't pay me more. Look at yourself in the mirror and realize you're not that good. And that's why they're not. Look, the market dictates everything. If you
Right.
can only charge X, it's kind of because you suck. That's the full stop, right? That's the tweet. That, this idea like the customers and the markets, you're not creating any value. And you know why we're not creating any
Well, that's
value?
the thing right
Because
there, the value. Yeah.
right, because we have firms full of mediocre talent. That's what it is. And we run off the people that have talent. Some of them might go start their own firms, but they quickly realize, why would I go start my own firm if I can only make X? And so I think really the reinvention of firms is really what it's. I mean, look, I get really frustrated about this topic to the point that I'm like, maybe I'll just go start an AE firm. 'Cause, like, this is just terrible what everybody's doing. And I have owner relationships and I talk to them plenty. And the funny thing is, when I ask them about compensation, or like how they firms charge them, they're like, yeah, they're a necessary evil. They don't create value. We need them because it's required, right? If you took away the required for registration, take that away, owners would probably just do it themselves. Contractors would get into the design world. So when you think about your only in the world of business, right? Your only defensive moat in your market is a stamp and a piece of paper that the government approves. Once again, just because you're registered doesn't make you a good engineer. It basically means that you're good at passing a test and you've worked enough in the industry, which, by the way, that's a big so what,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
The yeah, when I do my commodity, as this commodity does talk, I touch on that a lot, right? If the only thing, if your only defensible point is the license,
Mhm.
you lost.
Right.
Right. That's it. It's over because that's a solvable question, right? How do we get around that? We can figure that out. Figure out how to get around that. People already are without any technology, right?
Mhm.
So 100%. Yeah. And it's that is your point about the value. Right? What value are you creating? It's not the stamp. It's not that.
Mhm.
So you're exactly right. If leadership is not understanding not only how their clients, how the owners see value, but are not reaching out and saying, how can we generate other more value?
Mhm.
That's the one of the missing links.
Mhm. No, it's interesting. I was talking to a group the other day. They're a real estate development group. They have contracted with an engineering firm and an architecture firm. All the design gets done in Pakistan. They pay these people $1,000 per set of drawings.
Yeah.
We can argue about ethics. We can argue about all those things, right? Oh, is that illegal? Like, great, whatever, we can argue that. But when I said, like, what do these architects and engineers feel about that? They're like, this group in Pakistan does a better job than their own firms, and it takes them an hour to review everything, and it's $1,000. So they're charging $1,000 an hour, and they're like, they're doing great work. And now that we know their work, we know what to look for, um, and we have a relationship with that firm. We're excited. Now, this developer tells me this firm in Pakistan, not only are they cheaper labor, they're using technology. So they're
Right.
charging them 10% of what a normal fee rate would be.
Wow.
They're using cheap labor, they're using AI, they're staying very well organized and disciplined. Now he has a product with a high degree of repeatability, right?
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, like, we can hang our hat on like, oh, well, that's not ethical, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, we can have that debate,
But I
right?
mean, free markets are free markets, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I was having that conversation right before the holiday with somebody, and someone was talking about offshoring or outsourcing or whatever. We talk about that like that could be a negative thing, or we talk about that like it could be a new thing. But let's get real. Look at Gensler. You mentioned Gensler earlier.
Mhm.
Gensler has offices all over the world. What's one of the advantages of having offices all over the world?
Mhm.
Right, we have other people in other places with different
Right.
hourly rates, and we can work 24 hours a day, and all of those types of things. None of this is new.
Yeah. Try convincing a real estate developer in India to pay American wages.
Not going to happen.
Why would they? Right? Why would
Right.
they?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I think that's the problem, right? As long as you're like essentially professional services or labor arbitrage businesses, right?
Hmm.
And professional services businesses, they only exist for two reasons: capacity. I need more people. I need, as a customer, I don't have as many people. I don't want to build out my own call center. I don't want to build out my own architecture division. Just pure human body capacity. And the second one is competency. I can't
Right.
afford to keep, I do a lot of advisory work, right? Um, why do I charge what I charge and all that? Like, I bring a competency that a firm can't afford to keep full time,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And that's, those are the two buckets: capacity and
Hmm.
competency. And so I think a lot of these firms just don't think about it that way, in any form or fashion. And it's an interesting time. Look, I think as you can tell, I get very frustrated about this stuff because honestly, I'm talking to owners, and to go to an owner and hear that the industry that second generation, grew up in this, you've been in the, like, where these are our people, right? I
Yep.
feel like in many ways I'm like defending our entire industry when I get in these conversations.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm defending myself, with a pocket knife. Like, it's just I don't have a lot to go off of. And when these owners say things like, "Well, I mean, AEC, it's just necessary evil." These designers, AE
Hmm.
firms, necessary evil. Now they're starting to say things about GCs. I mean, they don't actually do work.
Right.
And whenever there's a change order, like, they're supposed to be mitigating risk. I've never seen them eat a change order because they missed something. The designers missed something, the contractor missed something. Who pays for it? I pay for it. And by the way,
Right.
I pay a lot more for it because it's after the fact.
Right.
I had an owner tell me, like, if I could bid out change orders, I would,
Interesting.
right? Because, construction, once you get, it's very competitive to get the job, but once you have the job, it's a monopoly,
Right. Yeah.
right?
Having been on
So
that side.
once the wolf is in the henhouse, and there's a lot of, quite honestly, there's some collusion, right? The contractors don't want to piss off the architects and engineers because they want to stay in their good graces so that they get invited to the next bid.
Hmm.
And the owner doesn't know any better.
Right. Right. So if we bring this conversation back around, and if somehow you jumped in the middle,
Mhm.
I'm used to doing a lot of live shows too, so it's people show up in the middle. But if you're listening and maybe you missed this at the very beginning, what we're doing right now is we're unpacking a post as we're recording this. It's about a week ago, I guess, that you posted this
Mhm.
on LinkedIn. KP posted a poll on LinkedIn and basically asked the question, why can't we attract and retain the best early career talent in the AEC industry? And the results that came back, I don't think were surprising. Good number of results, really great engagement around the poll and comments and votes and so on and so forth. The number one reason, according to 338 votes, 60% of the people that responded to the poll said compensation is the reason we can't attract and retain talent. The second most popular, and so between these two tops, it's 90% of the responses. Number one was the compensation. Number two was the old school culture. And if you missed that part of the conversation, just go back to the beginning. KP unpacked that. Um, but as we head towards wrapping this conversation up, KP, and some of this is a recap. Obviously, you've talked about it, but if you were to say, the number one thing or the one or two things that absolutely have to happen across the AEC industry, whether you're an A, an E, a
Mhm.
C, or some combination thereof, what's the number one, or maybe the number one and two things that have to happen in this industry to keep it relevant? And of course, that relevancy is judged by owners, is judged by the firm side, and specifically the talent, right? That's the purpose of the
Mhm.
poll. But what are the one or two things that have to happen in order to keep the AEC industry relevant?
I think we need to stop talking about um, about our work as a function of like design and this and that, right? If you are an architecture firm that designs a lot of stadiums, make it about designing stadiums. Like get them. Look, I mean, it's fascinating, right? Like designing a stadium. Like if you say, hey, you can be part, like we do this thing where like pay your dues in a generic level, right? Instead of saying, oh my God, I'm a sports nut, I love architecture, all I want to do is stadiums. Stop putting that pre-career filter on them. Just put them in your stadium group. I think, how do you design stadiums if you're not a sports fan,
Yeah, 100%.
right?
You know,
I mean,
how do you
but
even know what that experience is like? Go into a stadium.
I've met these people. They can't even kick a ball. Like, they're not sports fans, right? And so I think attract them early on the product that we design. You know, stop talking about designing schools. Start talking about shaping education. Hey, do you want to like shape the future education of generations to come? That's the pitch, right? The pitch is not, oh, come join Gensler. Who cares? I know we're picking on Gensler. Hopefully, I'll get an email from them. But I always love those emails. Why are you picking on me? Um, but no one cares, right? But if you can say, hey, do you want to come design the newest, the Las Vegas A's or whatever they're calling them? Do you want to come work on this stadium project? Versus saying, "Oh, you're not qualified, go do some door and window details, and then I'll let you come." Why would you do that? Like, let them get excited about the thing. So I think, 1, our firms are 0 exciting, no one cares, right? But the projects we work on are very exciting, and I think you have to hook them on the projects and being engaged with that. Um, it's like one of my sons is really into, you know, airplanes and like works at Delta. He's an industrial engineer, so he's fine being there. But if he was a civil engineer and he still has a fascination with planes, hey, do you want to design some of the world's best airports? Right? He can name every type of plane type. He can look at a plane and just look at its wings and tell you what plane that is. Right? So I think we've got to really dig into the work we do, not our firm and all that, and
Right.
and get people excited about that. And I think focus them on that. And also I think teach them things beyond here's how you draw classrooms. Send them to things where they get to learn about the future of education, how people are thinking about education, right? It's one of those like, I wish I could have been a high school teacher. I'm not, I'm an architect instead, but I want to be part of uplifting what the future high schools look like. And so I think that's where, the mission should not be around the firm and dumb timesheets and who cares, right? It should be around we do cool projects. Let's talk about the cool projects. Stop talking about our firms and get these kids involved early in a building type.
Yeah, 100%. And those of you that are out there listening to this, if you want to talk more about mission or purpose driven organizations, I've got a whole talk on that. Right? The value, the inherent value that comes with a purpose driven organization. I've got a handful of books on that shelf right up there. Studies on the competitive landscape when you're a purpose driven organization that also extends to recruiting and retaining. You know what you're saying
Yeah.
is 100% right, and it's not just architecture or engineering or construction. It's not just AEC. It's across the board. It's been studied for decades. But I think what you're saying it brings it all the way back around. You know the mission driven or the purpose driven. You know why is it that we do what we do?
Mhm.
right? Why is it that you design those things? It's not about, and I have this conversation with professional services firms all the time. We get caught up in this thing that we design, this jewel box that we design.
Mm.
That is not the reason that you were hired, right? If someone wants, and I had this conversation with somebody not too long ago, right? If somebody wants this beautiful jewel box museum designed by Calatrava or somebody like that, they're going to go hire Calatrava. They're not
Mhm.
hiring you, right? That's
Yeah.
that's the thing. They're not. They don't really care about the jewel box per se. They want it to be beautiful. They want it, but the point is, they want the impact of that design. They want
Mhm.
what comes from that design, and that from what you're saying, that's exactly what we need to be
Yes.
promoting to our young people. Is this is the impact of what you're doing?
Yeah, and I think there's this weird thing that we do in industry, and that is, um, if you're not a senior person on a project, you do not get any attribution to your efforts.
Right,
And
100%.
so, like, I don't care if you're a year out of college and you worked on an amazing stadium, let that young person take credit. Like,
Mhm.
let them put it on Instagram, let them put it on TikTok, like, let them, let them take some credit for it. But we make them feel like, well, I mean, all you did was draw details. It's not
Yeah.
really, I mean, can you really say you were part of the team? It's like
Mhm.
that we diminish like their contribution. And so what? Let them take credit. Let them post all, let them, let them go to Christmas with their family and say, yeah, I was one of the designers on this new stadium. Let them tell everyone. Let them tell the world.
Yeah.
Right? Don't tell like, oh well, you can't go around saying you were a designer because you didn't seal the drawings. Like it's like, no, I said I was a
Yeah.
designer. I didn't say I was the architect. And like leave me the fuck alone.
Yeah. That resonates with me so powerfully because a couple of months ago, I did a trip up to Chicago with someone, and that I worked in Chicago at the beginning of my career. And one of the projects that I worked on was the Chicago Museum of Contemporary Art. And my role at the Chicago Museum of Contemporary Art was the stair, the monumental stair that is in that museum. And it's the most photographed feature of the museum. I had no idea until I researched it later, but we walked we were walking through that. I said, we talked about the museum, and this is a stair, and I worked on this stair, and I downplayed that, right? Because that's what, when I was a young professional, what you're saying was exactly the thing. I can't take any credit for that stair. I can't have any claim to that stair, any of that work, because I didn't seal the drawings. I wasn't the architect of record, etc. But that was my thing. I worked on that stair for almost 2 years, and I was talking to this person. Um, we're looking at it, and she said, "You have to talk." Right? They're not from the profession, right? They don't. They
Mhm.
don't get that dynamic that you're talking about. She says, "You have to talk about that." Right?
Mhm.
That is the most photographed, the most talked about feature of this entire museum. And you were, even though you were 24 years old or whatever, 25 years old or something, when you worked on that, that's an important part of your career. And what you're saying is exactly right. I was never
Mhm.
allowed to talk about it, never allowed to photograph it. I do now because I don't care. But it's like you are diminished, right? You're pushed down,
Mhm.
and I that really resonates with me what you were just saying, because that is 100% my truth.
Yeah. It's like for me, I was a geotechnical engineer, which means I did like deep foundations on the Olympic Stadium.
Right. Exactly.
I'm like, that's my stadium. Right. And then it was funny. I was as my kids were getting older, I'm like, yeah, that's my stadium. Right. They were like, Dad, what did you design? I'm like, all the stuff you can't see, it's in the ground. They're like, oh, so you didn't
100%. Yeah.
actually design it. I was like, well,
Yeah. Yeah.
design's a team effort, right? But no, I think there's just weird little things that we can do to really, if we are, my point is, if we all recognize the industry as a problem, there's some simple ways to start changing the culture of how we think about things. And I think that's really getting rid of this hierarchy of thinking and pay
Right.
your dues,
Yeah.
and the recognition from leadership. The industry that you joined 30 years ago was a different time,
Yeah.
right? We now live in a different time with different talent. I mean, I get so frustrated too. Like, these kids are so smart.
Hmm.
They know so much. They are like very, we raised a generation and told them they need to be more well-rounded.
Right.
And then it happened. And then now we complain about it,
Exactly.
right? They're
Yeah.
very smart, not just around STEM, but around everything. And I think, you know, we have to realize that.
Yeah. Yeah. My response, because I hear that a lot, it's like, well, these young people, and my response to that is, this is this is the way we raised them.
Mhm.
What did we expect was going to happen?
Right.
Right.
100%.
This is it. Yeah. Quit passing along the generational trauma, the old school culture. Yeah. All right. I think that's a pretty good place to wrap up this conversation. So thank you for joining us as KP and I unpacked his LinkedIn post where he asked the question, why can't we attract and retain the best early career talent in the AEC industry? If you're not following KP on LinkedIn, you should be. That's where you find all of these posts that we talked about when we do these KP Unpacked episodes or unpacking KP episodes. Today, we've been talking about this poll about attracting and retaining the best talent in the AEC industry. And we also mentioned our early and mid career mastermind group, which is built to encourage people to stay in the industry and attract people into the industry. We bring in speakers. It's a peer group. It's a great networking opportunity for early and mid career people. It's a great
Yeah.
opportunity for you to send your people um, to show them the value in the alternative paths, right?
Yeah.
You probably have a program in your firm. I hear this all the time. Why would I send people to this when we have our own program in house? Because you're really good at mentoring people on how to be an architect, traditionally speaking, how to be an engineer, traditionally speaking. Those traditionally speaking paths are eroding away, they're going away. We are talking about the reality of the future of the AEC industry. So, if you want to know more, if you're interested in the early and mid career, either for yourself or for your people, go to our website, kpready.co, not .coms, kpready.co. If you go to the programs tab at the top, you can hit the mastermind groups and you can find the button for early and mid career professionals. Or it's a little bit of a long URL, kpready.co/mastermind groups /early and mid career professionals. Just go to the website, go to
Please fix that.
programs, go to mastermind groups.
Please get that
Yeah,
fixed.
we
I
should
will
have
tell
a
you, Jeff,
short.
what's been fascinating about this mastermind groups. 80% of the people, these young people, are paying for it out of their pocket,
Yeah, that
right?
is not what I
And
expected.
I did not expect that. That's how much pain they're in, right? Like,
Right.
my firm won't pay for it. I think the best thing you can do as a firm leader is say, hey, I get it. You're a little bit different.
Hmm.
So I'm going to pay for you to go be part of this,
Right.
right? This is how you capture the different, the people that we're concerned about losing
Hmm.
because they're a little different. Their mission is a little different. The way they're wired is a little bit different. If it's your top performing engineer that wants to be an engineer, this is not for them. This is for the people that just kind of, they could create a lot of value to the firm. You want to keep them there, but they're just made a little bit different, built different.
Yeah, one of the questions that I've gotten more than once is, well, what if I send my people there or one of my people to this group and they get recruited away or something like that? And
Shame on you.
yeah, exactly. I mean, my first question is, what if you don't send them?
Hmm.
Right? If you don't send them, if they're not already, they're going to be looking and they're going to get recruited away or they're just going to leave on their own, right? They're
Yeah.
looking for something else. But what a great opportunity to expose them to an alternative path, perhaps, and actually keep them, actually retain them, which is the whole point of this effort. So,
Yeah. Also, what is
so
it? What
check
does
that
it
out.
tell you? What does it tell you if you send your top performers to AIA and they don't get recruited away?
Well, that's an excellent point. As a longtime AIA member, that's still an
Uh,
excellent point. All right, you've been listening to KP Ready Unpacked. My name is Jeff Eccles. I'm a senior advisor and the head of our mastermind and incubator programs here. I'm joined, as always, by KP Ready, who is our CEO and founder of both Shadow Ventures and KP Ready Company. We do this once a week where we go to KP's LinkedIn posts, the things he posted on LinkedIn, and I get to ask him, "Hey, what were you thinking when you posted that?" It's fun for me to ask that question, but it gives us insight into what's going on, the conversations that KP has, and the way that he's thinking about the AEC industry. So, KP, thanks as always for joining me today.
Good to be here, Jeff.
And for those of you that are out there listening, thank you for joining us. We'll be back again next week with another KP Unpacked. Thanks, everybody.